New housing figures have given weight to concerns that Australia could face another housing bubble as the economy recovers.
House prices rose an average of 3.3% in the June quarter. They're now back to their June 2008 level. Matthew Bell is an economist with the Australian Property Monitors Group, and he joins us now from Sydney. Matthew Bell, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Back to June 2008, so that was it. If you wanted to buy a cheap house, that was the rather short-lived period, was it?
I think we have seen the bottom of the prices in terms of the housing market. For the majority of the sector, you've got to remember the top end, as in the most expensive suburbs, are still a way below those highs.
So they haven't, they're still way below those highs. They haven't made a big comeback yet.
Well, this quarter was really their first good performance in terms of prices. I mean, some of the suburbs fell 20 and 30% for those more expensive houses.
Yeah.
And while they contributed a lot to this quarter, you know, they're still 10 and 15% below their highs, particularly in Sydney.
All right, well, Matthew, take us through the headline figures. What did the Australian Property Monitors Group find?
Yeah, so national house prices rose by about 3.3% in the June quarter alone to pretty much come back to those June 08 levels, and units were up about 2%. That was driven largely by Darwin, which has been strong for a long time, but for the first time a real strong growth in Sydney and Melbourne, particularly for houses. Sydney up 3.7% and Melbourne up nearly 6% in terms of house prices. And
what part of the sector is driving this rise?
It really is those top 30% of suburbs, what we call the more expensive suburbs. They had rises of over 8% in Melbourne and closer to 5 and 6% in Sydney. Those affordable end properties, the first homeowner market, still bubbling along and still underpinning the market, but the majority of the growth in this quarter alone was driven by those more expensive suburbs, and they've still got, like I said, they've still got some way to come back, so that could underpin it for another quarter yet.
Was APM expecting this result?
In March, we saw the market pretty much going from going down to consolidating and being flat, so we expected a stronger quarter. I don't think we quite expected top-end prices to be as strong or come back in one hit like it did.
Yeah.
But those affordable end properties are still bubbling along and still will until those grants run out in September and December. Because
during the March quarter, as I remember it, it was the lower end of the market that was driving some sort of increase in those property values, wasn't it?
It really has, and for the last 9 months they've underpinned, and
so
those top end
are still picking up a bargain mentality.
It is in that top end. I mean, there's some big discounts. I mean, there was a lot of stories recently about, you know, how much prices have fallen on particular properties around the country in that prestige market, and with the economy turning around and the finance sector picking up a bit in terms of jobs in Sydney and Melbourne, people are a bit more secure about their income, and they have some good ideas about what are bargains around the place.
What's Australian Property Monitors' view of the constant criticism, it seems to be, of the fact that we have the potential for a housing bubble in Australia? Does APM agree that we're at the beginning or somewhere along the lines of developing a bubble?
No, in short, I don't. I really think you've got to view this very strong quarter as recovering a lot of those 2008 losses. Even in the affordable market in parts of the country, you're still getting back to those levels and just exceeding them. I think that the point of the speech by the governor the other day really was looking into the future and saying that if we don't build enough houses, if we don't address those supply side issues, then we are going to have a problem where this easy credit has allowed prices to bubble. I don't think we're there yet, and I think we're a long way. That's a long way in the future, and hopefully we won't get there.
And you don't think that such things as the first home buyers grant contribute to creating a bubble?
I think the first homeowners grant and the boost in particular was very successful. I think people underestimate how important the halving of mortgage rates over the same period was, and given that we're going to have the expectation that we have low rates for at least well into 2010, that support's going to be there. No one really likes that, you know, we can't have these quarterly growth rates that we had this quarter going forward. That translates into bubble growth rates, but we're looking after this quarter to get a more sustainable, moderate growth and recovery, but given all those, you know, high population growth and not quite enough building yet, we can't see any falls in the near future.
So we're not at the beginning of a boom?
I think it's way too premature to say that. I think it's a good sign that the market's coming back, and I think it's good that prices are rising, particularly for people who own property, not so good for people who are looking to get into the market.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to see those annual growth rates of 9 and 10% that we maybe saw for, you know, the period up to 2004 for a while yet. I think people's perception of house prices that they can fall and they can go flat, and that's a good thing, because previously people thought that they could just go up.
That's right, that there was never any coming down. Matthew Bell, good to chat with you. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.